Thank you, and welcome to all who are coming to our discussion today. As we mark Laudato Si week, Pope Francis offers a good framework for our discussion today when he says, I urgently appeal for a new dialogue about how we are shaping the future. We need a conversation which includes everyone, since the challenges we are undergoing concern and affect us all. That will be part of our discussion both today and in the seminars to follow. On the one hand, there is hope. On the positive side, significant gains have been made for women and girls' integral development since the Millennium Development Goals were established over 20 years ago. The rates of women and girls going to school, finishing their education have increased, as have women's receipt of some payment for their labor. Before the pandemic, progress was made to reduce rates of hunger and extreme poverty, to raise women's access to nutrition, education, and health outcomes. The Millennium Development Goals were expanded upon with the Sustainable Development Goals that also embraced women's integral development and the expansion of food security, particularly as both are challenged by climate change and environmental harms. Also, in a sign of progress, we mark this year the 20th anniversary of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which led the United Nations Women, Peace, and Security resolutions and agenda. And it helped create goals, commitment, benchmarks, and metrics for expanding the inclusion of women in peace and security processes and outcomes. So there is much to be hopeful about. However, challenges remain. And as we will hear from our speakers today, the pandemic has undermined this progress made toward these goals. And even before the pandemic, progress toward expanding women and girls' integral development and security has not been equal and has not been uniform. Even before the pandemic, women do most of the unpaid labor around the world. Women and girls comprise over 60% of the world's poor subsistence farmers, too often performing unpaid labor and working land for which they have no formal land rights and experiencing food insecurity. Women are much less likely to have access to a formal banking or a bank account. Most of the countries which did not reach the Millennium Development Goals in women's empowerment were in sub Saharan Africa. And those countries in Africa and the Middle East today have the lowest scores for women's development. In my research, I talked with women around the world, some of whom were instrumental in rewriting their own constitutions and laws in their countries to make it legal for women to own land and to own property. But they unfortunately report that while the legal codes have changed, often the cultural practices and the implementation of those laws lag behind, so that women are still deprived of basic rights. For example, more than 80% of the world's farmland is owned by men. So women farm that land but have no formal rights to it. The world's most food insecure countries are also the world's youngest countries, primarily those in Africa. Around the world, women and girls go hungry more than men and boys, and this gender gap for food insecurity is worse in Africa. And those are also the world's most food insecure countries. They are also the countries which remain stuck in major armed conflict. Food insecurity is worse in countries at war. Food can be used as a weapon of war, and the causality goes both ways. In a negative feedback loop, conflict often is exacerbated by food insecurity, with fighting breaking out between farmers and herders, with fighting often sparked around food markets. You can't build peace on an empty stomach, and you cannot feed the hungry without women's empowerment. Countries such as Nigeria, Syria, Yemen, South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, these countries need economic growth and growth in food security to break out of the cycle of a conflict trap of recurring cycles of violence and vengeance. Expanding women's integral development is thus important not only as a value in and of itself, as a basic value of human life and dignity, but it is also necessary both to end hunger and to end wars. Research by the FAO shows that expanding women's resources, even just to the level of poor men, would lift 150 million people out of hunger every year. Research shows that women's economic development has a great cascading effect. Women spread resources around. They particularly invest in families and children. When women have economic power, they invest in the children, in food, in education, in healthcare for children. Where women have economic empowerment, child mortality is greatly reduced. And when women are included in decision-making, peace accords are much more likely to last. Long before the pandemic, Pope Francis noted that this economy kills, that the inequalities and exclusions of our current political and economic systems have lethal consequences. Thus, we need to build more inclusive, integrated systems so that the fruits of the earth can benefit everyone. As Pope Francis said in Laudato Si', we must bring the whole human family together to sustainable and integral development. And to do so, we must have more inclusive dialogue to shape a different future. Today's webinar and the subsequent ones to follow this urging of Laudato Si' to expand the dialogue to build a healthier and a more just future. I thank all of you for joining us in this dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Marianne Love, for that important grounding. This is such an exciting conversation to be having. I am Kerry Medek, and I'm delighted to be among all of you today. I bring warm greetings from Minneapolis, Minnesota. Good morning, afternoon, and evening from wherever you may be in the world. As Marianne noted, our task today is to shine a light on the vital role that women play in society and in food production, and to create ways to increase and strengthen their participation even further. It's painfully clear women's voices have largely been neglected in decision-making processes locally, regionally, and at global levels due to enduring underrepresentation in senior leadership. And the burden they face in rural contexts is particularly harsh. So we aim to interject women's voices into the global food debate today, and in the context of a global pandemic that is greatly disrupting our consciousness about what is possible. Women bear the greatest hardship of food insecurity, yet are also part of the solution. As Marianne noted, 60% of those that are food insecure are women and girls. And according to recent data from the UN Women Report, ensuring women have greater access to agricultural resources would increase female farm returns up to 30% and increase agricultural production in developing countries up to 4%. And what this means is freeing nearly 150 million people from undernourishment. So what is stopping such a global transformation from happening? Today, I am joined by an esteemed set of accomplished women ready to help us answer this question. I'll begin with a brief introduction of each speaker. They will speak for about 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll close with a few questions. We hope that you leave today with a clear sense of the facts about the vital role that women play in food production. Before we start, the 3 things to be listening for in the discussion. The first, women play a central role in food production at home, in community, and beyond, and yet they're routinely left out of decision-making, which grossly limits progress. Food justice is social justice at all levels, from household to community and beyond. Both food justice and social justice must be pursued in tandem, not separately. And finally, this is about human dignity and planting seeds of hope. By creating conditions where women have necessary access to finance, equitable division of household labor, and decision-making power, we improve food security for all, and anything becomes possible. I'm so delighted to start by introducing Dr. Daniela Fumarola. Daniela is the Confederal Secretary of the Italian Confederation of Trade Unions. With over 30 years of experience, Daniela brings the perspective of millions of workers with a key message of putting people at the center of solutions. She'll speak to the dignity of work, the avoidance of child labor, a focus on resiliency and recovery, and equal rights and collective bargaining as a tool. Daniela, the floor is yours.
Grazie per questa opportunità che mi date di esprimere il punto di vista della CISL a questo importante incontro. Sono molto contenta di essere qui con voi. Vi porto i saluti del nostro segretario generale Luigi Sbarra, che nel suo precedente incarico è stato protagonista della lotta sindacale contro il caporalato in agricoltura, che ha condotto ad una legge tra le più avanzate a livello internazionale. Parlare di cibo e sviluppo ci riconduce immediatamente, come avete detto, al mondo agricolo, una comunità di donne e uomini che ogni giorno vivono in prima persona la fatica che si nasconde dietro tanti prodotti di eccellenza. Donne e uomini che in questo anno terribile funestato dal Covid in tutto il mondo hanno continuato a lavorare garantendo la sopravvivenza alimentare alle comunità. Se c'è una cosa che la pandemia ci ha insegnato è che siamo tutti legati allo stesso destino, vale per il mondo del lavoro e per i popoli dei nostri paesi. E se è vero che la terra è un dono, è anche vero che per renderla fertile, per trasformarla, per difenderla, occorre il lavoro delle persone. È nel lavoro umano che si trova la chiave di volta dello sviluppo sostenibile. È il lavoro che ci porterà fuori da questa crisi che ha colpito soprattutto le donne e i giovani. Pensate che in Italia solo nel mese di dicembre su 101.000 posti di lavoro persi, 99.000 erano donne. Bene, io credo che la terra sia il luogo per eccellenza di un patto tra generazioni e generi. E come ha scritto Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, non ereditiamo la terra dai nostri avi, ma ce la facciamo prestare dai nostri figli. Per una sindacalista questo messaggio assume un valore doppio, significa che abbiamo il compito di utilizzarla, ma allo stesso tempo di consegnarla più feconda, migliorata a chi verrà dopo di noi. E tutto questo presuppone impegno e sostegno speciali, perché l'agroalimentare non è un settore come tutti quanti gli altri. Il lavoro che lo sostiene è un lavoro speciale che unisce il sacrificio alla professionalità e alla passione, in tanti casi di tante donne. Noi oggi dobbiamo piantare il seme di un modello di sviluppo solidale, più solidale, che metta al centro la tutela del suolo e della persona che lavora. È un aspetto essenziale anche nel nostro paese, dove lottiamo quotidianamente per dare garanzia a centinaia di migliaia di lavoratrici e lavoratori dell'agricoltura, della trasformazione alimentare, dei comparti ambientali. Riscoprire il valore e i valori del lavoro agroalimentare vuol dire anche parlare di una Unione Europea, vuol dire parlare all'Unione Europea ancora di più oggi, e questo significa promuovere in tutte le sedi comunitarie la difesa di una politica di sviluppo agroalimentare ancorata saldamente a un modello sociale. Significa anche avere un'impostazione che ci deve tenere lontani da trattati internazionali privi di clausole a tutela della dignità della persona e del lavoro. Un'impostazione che ripudi qualunque forma di sfruttamento femminile e minorile, sia negli stati ad economia avanzata che nelle nazioni del secondo e terzo mondo, dove si estendono le catene di fornitura delle multinazionali. Bisogna dire no ad ogni accordo gestito in stanze chiuse a doppia mandata. Dobbiamo opporci ad ogni intesa che non sia limpida su principi di sostenibilità e di precauzione. Dobbiamo dire no come comunità sociale internazionale agli accordi nel segno del liberismo più sfrenato, che considerano le norme a tutela delle lavoratrici e dei lavoratori, le conquiste della contrattazione, le considerano ostacoli per il commercio. La contrattazione non è un ostacolo, non è un freno, ma al contrario è un motore che genera diritti e crescita equa. L'obiettivo quindi è coniugare il miglioramento delle condizioni delle lavoratrici e dei lavoratori a una maggiore produttività e competitività di sistema. L'eccellenza del nostro sistema primario nasce da filiere che investono sulla crescita del capitale umano, che fanno formazione, che applicano i contratti e che coltivano relazioni sindacali, bilaterali, responsabili e costruttive, che rafforzano il sistema delle tutele attraverso un welfare che guarda di più e meglio alla necessità che il lavoro di cura appartenga a uomini e donne. C'è un tempo per seminare e un tempo per raccogliere, si legge nel Vangelo. Ecco, noi tutti dobbiamo essere consapevoli di vivere nel tempo della semina. La crisi devastante che ha colpito il mondo senza distinzioni e in cui siamo ancora fatalmente immersi, ci ricorda che il nostro cammino verso uno sviluppo sostenibile, verso la ricostruzione, è ben lontano dal traguardo. Per tanti versi deve ancora cominciare. In questo tempo le donne, il lavoro delle donne, il valore delle donne può e deve essere e deve fare la differenza. Le considerevoli risorse disponibili nel Recovery Fund, la declinazione che il governo italiano fa nel Piano Nazionale di Ripresa e Resilienza sono uno strumento fondamentale e anche una grande occasione che, come ci ricorda il Santo Padre, non dobbiamo assolutamente sprecare. Donne e giovani sono trasversali nelle 6 missioni, ma non devono rimanere solo un buon proposito. I contenuti del piano vanno implementati con maggiori interventi. Faccio solo un esempio. Nella seconda missione, che riguarda rivoluzione verde e transizione ecologica, per garantire impatti significativi in termini di occupazione femminile, è indispensabile che vengano sviluppati percorsi di orientamento e formazione dedicati alle donne e vanno previsti specifici sgravi fiscali per la loro assunzione, in un contesto che, al contrario, è fortemente caratterizzato da una presenza di lavoratori uomini. Ecco, allora noi abbiamo tanto da fare. E riusciremo a farlo se nel Paese sarà chiaro che la ricostruzione dovrà passare dalla valorizzazione delle potenzialità umane, le donne e i giovani, quelle economiche, quelle di sistema che finora non sono state valorizzate. Il nostro domani è quello che oggi sapremo costruire insieme e per farlo dobbiamo sconfiggere i nemici, il virus e la diseguaglianza che la pandemia ha rinforzato, un gap che carica di sofferenza proprio quelle realtà deboli che invece andrebbero sostenute secondo un principio di lungimirante e doverosa solidarietà. Il divario mondiale nei livelli di nutrizione è semplicemente spaventoso. Circa un terzo del cibo prodotto nel mondo, secondo la FAO, finisce nei rifiuti prima ancora di essere immesso in circolazione. Lo spreco è superiore al 1 miliardo di tonnellate l'anno, per un valore che sfiora il 1 miliardo di dollari. Per contro, la fame cronica colpisce ancora nel mondo circa 800 milioni di persone. Il paradosso è sotto gli occhi di tutti e genera rabbia e indignazione. Ma rabbia e indignazione non bastano, perché il seme della speranza non germoglia da solo, va piantato, va innaffiato e difeso da un'azione partecipata che non esclude la responsabilità di nessuno. Lavoro, imprese, istituzioni, il sistema educativo, il processo di cambiamento verso un paradigma più solidale, efficiente e sostenibile passa per un'alleanza che vada oltre i sistemi normativi e deve farsi coscienza condivisa e collettiva, un impegno quotidiano per tutti. E questa è in fondo la vocazione che abbiamo ereditato nell'enciclica di Papa Francesco, una rinnovata speranza per la salute del pianeta, la tutela delle risorse, una promessa concreta e solenne per la dignità di chi opera e lavora ogni giorno, prendendosi cura della terra e dei nostri figli. Speranza e promessa che, mutuando le parole del pontefice, passano attraverso l'impegno delle donne. La donna, scrive il Papa, è colei che fa bello il mondo, che lo custodisce e mantiene in vita. Vi porta la grazia che fa nuove le cose, l'abbraccio che include, il coraggio di donarsi. Grazie e buon lavoro.
Thank you, Dr. Fumarola. Thank you so much. Indeed, it is a time for sewing. I'd like to turn and introduce Ms. Ndaya Benchika. Ndaya represents the International Fund for Agricultural Development as a lead technical specialist on gender and social inclusion. She brings 30 years of experience to this discussion in the areas of policy, rural development, and finance. She'll speak to the central role of women, as well as the necessary role of gender equality, the role of food and nutrition as a fundamental right. Ndaya, it's my pleasure. Please share with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm grateful for this opportunity. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for colleagues. I do represent in IFAD, and then for those of you who don't know, so IFAD is also the ACRE agency for the Food Systems Summit concerning the action track number 4 that looks at advancing equitable livelihoods in value distribution in the food systems. So we have 3 key messages for you. And the first one relates to the fact that women are central to sustainably improve the lives of their families and communities, and therefore must play a pivotal role in building the resilience of the community to climate change. Gender equality and women's empowerment are vital to meeting the challenges of improving food insecurity, nutrition, and enabling the poorer household to overcome poverty. Although women make up 43% of the agricultural labor force worldwide, despite this representation, women have fewer assets and less decision-making power than men. They lack access to finance and land, as well as agricultural resources, which leave them exposed to food insecurity, malnutrition, poverty, climate shocks, and a lot of variability. Evidence from a range of countries show that increasing the share of household income controlled by women, either through their own earnings or cash transfer, would change the spendings in ways that would benefit children as well as the entire family. In addition to all of this, women hold unique traditional knowledge, which often includes the stewardship of agrobiodiversity and neglected and utilized species, as well as household nutrition. In this context, women empowerment can contribute to community resilience and equitable intergenerational benefits, such as improved food security, household income, and resilience. So now women's empowerment is also key for social justice that is necessary, the necessary condition for food justice. In poor rural households, women bear a high workload of unpaid household labor and have little control over household income. Despite a key role in feeding her household, women often suffer worst from malnutrition, they eat last, and despite all of this, they also have some high level of nutrition requirements that are not met. At IFAD, we work on in a number of ways with varieties of partners to ensure that women, as well as other marginalized groups, are the key stakeholders in discussions and are also key participants in devising and implementing some important solutions. For instance, IFAD works with women to create local women's groups that provide greater agency for women. A second example, IFAD targets specific value chains opportunities for women, which often complement their traditional knowledge, as well as create some seed banks and sales for garden products. And the third example shows that IFAD also, through its projects, aim to remove the unique obstacles to accessible finance, as well as providing and leverage their own financing needs for the promotion of their own businesses. In addition to that, partnering with men is essential for gender equality and the empowerment of women. IFAD promotes a range of approaches, and in doing so, is focusing on changing the gender dynamics between men and women. Most importantly, IFAD is a leader in the use of household methodology, such as gender action learning systems, or what we call the GALs, which address the gender inequalities at household level, resulting in more equitable distribution of unpaid household labor and greater control of household income, as well as household decision making. Empowerment in the household is an integral part to make the most out of the new opportunities outside of the household. It is a vital foundation towards securing three things: economic empowerment, decision-making representation, as well as equitable workload balance for rural women. And I would like to conclude with this third message. The lack of gender disaggregated data at national levels in policies as well as development put women at risk of being left behind. Across countries, many agricultural, forestry, natural resources management, as well as climate change and trade policies and investment do not include or provide gender equality and women's empowerment, despite the critical roles that women played across food systems as producers, processors, traders, and consumers. For instance, in Africa, despite substantial gender gap, regional and national agricultural investment plans insufficiently address gender inequalities and do not provide an enabling environment for women's empowerment in agri-food systems. A gender audit of 38 national agricultural investment plans show that rarely integrate a thorough gender analysis and do not always use sex disaggregated data. A review of climate change policies in Latin America countries also showed a lack of integration of gender in policies. And when gender was monitored, this was not carried throughout the action plans, and there were no budgets to actually implement the recommended policies. Integrated gender in food system policies will provide the legal framework for driving actions and allocating the requirement investments that do not only close the gender gap, but also address the underlying causes of gender inequality of women's empowerment in food systems. So in closing, we would recommend that countries need to outline the clear target for gender transformative activities, including the percentage of budget for those initiatives, which integrate collections of sex disaggregated data across the entire food system in the national statistics. And I will conclude with this. Over to you, Kerry.
Thank you so much, and I very much appreciate those comments and focus on filling data gaps is always important. I'm going to pivot now to introducing panelists who offer a country level perspective and connecting that, helping us connect that to this global conversation. I welcome today Ms. Romana Koech, who is representing AVSI Foundation. She's based in Kenya. We also have Ms. Betty Rose Abuti, who is Policy and Advocacy Specialist and National Coordinator with Caritas Uganda, as well as Ms. Musamba Mubanga, the Program Specialist in the area of livelihoods and climate change adaptation with Caritas Zambia. Each will share some perspective from their countries about women and food security and stories of success that help us understand the value of accompanying women, providing them access so they may chart their own course and guide us all toward food justice. Romana, we'll start with you.
So good afternoon. Thank you very much, Kerry. I am delighted to be part of this forum to discuss and bring stories of women to the international arena and to understand what really goes on down at the peripheries. So my name is Romana. I work for AVSI in Kenya as the country representative. So from AVSI, I'm delighted to say that we are pleased to share our experience of women who are supported, accompanied to do and to believe in themselves, to recognize and be aware of their own dignity. Starting from this point, they are able to become independent, to work, to support their children and families, and to activate that process of development for the whole community that they belong to. So our key point, my key point is to be the interest of the promotion of a single person within the community and connected to the family and also the wider community. So the stories I'm going to share with you is to demonstrate this value of women well supported, that when women are well supported, they can be able to foster, strengthen the link of the community to that of their engagement and actually to help their families put food on the table and be able to face problems that every day are not well faced starting from the fact of food insecurity. So the first story is of a woman that lives in the slum of Kibera. She's Jacinta. She's a widow and a mother of three children. She's been living in Kibera for 20 years. And Jacinta was at the verge of losing her small business during the COVID pandemic. Thanks to the micro enterprises of AVSI, she was able to stay afloat and to save money, to reinvest, and be able to put food on the table and to be able to save something, and more importantly, to be able to pay rent. That is very important for the stability of the family. In her own words, Jacinta says, I feel really like crying because when I recall where I have come from and how my life has improved, just for this single fact of being helped to save and to reinvest, I can only say thank you for what you have done to me. And today, my children are not going to sleep hungry without food, or they are not being disturbed by the landlord because I'm able to pay rent, and I feel human. The fact that I can be able to take care of my children on my own without asking anybody to help me. So those are the words of Jacinta that was helped by the women's micro enterprises that are being assisted by AVSI in the slum of Kibera. My second story is from Adelaide, that is a refugee woman living in Kenya. And Adelaide was really distraught when she arrived in Kenya because she had nowhere to stay, no friends, so she relied on well-wishers and neighbors to be able to be housed, to put food on the table for herself and a child. And as soon as, before 1 year was over, she lost the child that she had. And the situation really was more compromised. When she met the groups of AVSI micro enterprises, she was able to train in business market-oriented skills, in particular on soap making. This enabled her slowly by slowly to start saving for a passion, for the passion that she has is in tailoring. So this micro enterprise, this market-oriented skill to make soap, enable her to sell the soap, to have a small possibility of renting her own room, and now to be able to save for the future. So two things has happened for her in the micro enterprise group. One, she was able to be accompanied through the psychosocial support that is given by our social worker and also by our field personnel. The second is that she saved the money to be able to put food on a table and also to save for the future in order to realize her dream and to regain back her dignity by doing for herself what she wanted to do all the life. So currently she lives we're paying her rent and putting food on the table while saving for a passion that is in tailoring. So the third story is of a young woman. She's called Mercy. Mercy was a recipient of education programs for AVSI. And after finishing high school, Mercy was able to go to college, and now currently she's the sales manager for an insurance company. And the important bit is that this possibility for her to go to school, to do a credible course in college that help her find a job is what has really changed her stakes, in the sense that now she's married, she has 2 children. She's able to pay rent for herself. She's able to give food to her children and send them to the school of her choice. And more importantly, also, she has not forgotten where she came from. She has helped her mother to start a small business that is now helping also other siblings that from the household of Mercy. In her own words, Mercy says, my name is Mercy, AVSI alumni. I would really wish to thank you for having come to Kenya. I would say it was not very clear how my destiny was going to be until I met you. Thank you so much, and I wish you all the blessings from God and in future. I wish also to touch a child's heart as a way of appreciation of offering me education support. And thank you for the moral support and the friendliness and the spiritual support, and more so for connecting me with my destiny. This is in our own words and in our own writing. Mercy says this. I felt that this story was really very central in the sense that now Mercy, being the manager for a company, is already in the line of leadership. She's able to make the decision for herself and for her children, and to show that the little that was put for her education has actually changed the stakes for this lady, and in future is going also to change the stakes for our children. So in conclusion, I want to say that these stories that I shared are not only for these three women. These are stories for all the members of the micro enterprises that we are supporting. That is more than 3,000, and indeed to show that women, with the little that they are given, they can make extraordinary help for their families, extraordinary contribution to their families, to the communities, and to the ecosystem as a whole. Going forward, I'd like to suggest that there is need to support these works that help women to come on the table of decision, to be able to take care of themselves and to regain that dignity. So, and the last and not least is to say that these women micro enterprises are not only business oriented, they are also support groups for women, because they talk about what's happening in their life. They share ideas and they are there sharing what they have. So this also is an entry point to reach the communities that are hard to reach, especially in the rural areas, and to bring them on that table that they can speak, and tomorrow they are the leaders of their families and also help the communities to grow. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you so much, Romana, for that, for words from Mercy and other amazing women. I think another point you're making is that every woman is an individual, and the needs that she needs are unique to her. And so blanket policy is difficult to apply to every person. Everyone has a unique and special need in their lives and where they are. So thank you for sharing that. We have 7 or 8 minutes to wrap up this section. So I'm going to turn it to Betty Rose next, and then Musamba will follow. Betty Rose, Caritas, Uganda, please share with us your experience.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to share Caritas Uganda experiences. Can I share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to.
Yes.
And just keep in mind, we have about 4 minutes for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just going to be very fast. Do you see my screen?
Yes, there we are.
Yes, the role of women in Uganda. I just give a brief background that agriculture is the mainstay of Uganda's economy, and our population is over 40 million, and about 36 million live in the rural areas, and most of them depend on agriculture for the entire livelihood. 70% of women are employed under the agriculture sector. The role of women in Uganda: women are very key contributors to the integral human development in both economic and social. And also economically, we look at education. Women are the ones in Uganda responsible to educate their children. And they do that even to pay the school fees. And I must say that over 40% of education institutions are managed by women, and especially the nuns. The women also do the production, marketing, and productivity, and they do care for Mother Earth. What have we done as Caritas Uganda? So we have helped build the capacity of women farmers to advocate for their own rights openly. They can now write to the Speaker of Parliament, and they can be given space to air their views. The other thing that we have done as Caritas Uganda is to empower the small children, the little children in school, to empower them with the skills to conserve the environment. This picture is during the the International Earth Day. We have also worked with the schools to give them counseling and the senior women teachers so that they can support the school children. But you can see at the background, the children are seated on a bare floor. That can explain what happens during the learning process when they sit on a bare floor. Women also play a very key role in marketing, but the challenge here is the women do marketing and transporting the produce from their homes to the market, and moreover on their heads. And this is a challenge. And if only such women could be helped with other means of taking their produce to the market, it would be better. Caritas has also empowered the women to own their own livestock. We have also empowered women to conserve the environment by providing them with the energy saving stoves. Women are key in providing food for the family. And when you provide food for the family, you create peace and harmony, because an angry man is easily irritable. The challenge: inadequate access to production, climate crisis, inadequate knowledge, and market-oriented farming, lack of inclusive planning and implementation of programs. We also have, this is a very big one, and I must talk about this. During a study by Caritas Uganda and partners in 2019, it revealed that there are high levels of chemical residues in food, especially tomatoes and others. This is because the women do not have the skills to use the chemicals, but also because there is a belief that we need to go modern in agriculture. And at the end of the day, you find that women and everyone is eating poison. The other one is genetic engineering and the modern technologies that have really bogged down the women. So this engineering, in Uganda, we had a bill proposed by the parliament, but as Caritas Uganda, we struggled to make sure this bill was pro-women and pro-people. I must say, 3 parliaments, that is 15 years ago, have gone, this bill has not passed. Recommendations: sensitization of all stakeholders, promotion of financial literacy, and a need to design women technologies, machinery to help them take their produce to the market, improve the extension, and then make women aware policies and programming in decision making, inclusive planning and the implementation of programs, promotion of women-friendly farming systems like agroecology, and then we improve access to development inputs like credit, information, and mechanization. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you, Betty Rose. Musamba, we have about 3 minutes. We would love to hear your perspective from Zambia, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Kerry. So I think I share similar sentiments with what Betty just from sharing, but I'll just maybe speak to a few that maybe she has not picked on. So Betty, I'll just ask that you move the slides quickly for me, since you're sharing the screen. Okay, okay, let me just speak from here. Okay, so just to share, in Zambia, we have about 17.8 million in terms of population, and of this, we have about 53% that are women. And agriculture contributes highly to the GDP of about 20%, and also contributes 12% to the national export earnings. And the sector employs nearly 70% of the labor force and remains the main source of income, especially for women. And also, it's a major source of both income and employment for those people that are living in the rural areas. And in terms of sharing some of the concerns around the agriculture and food security, in Zambia, the agriculture sector, as well as the food processing industry, has been contributing a lot to environmental degradation. So this is more of producing greenhouse greenhouse gases and also the use of pesticide, which have degraded the environment. And prior to COVID-19 in Zambia, we had over 23% million that were estimated to be facing severe acute food security. And though no assessment has been done since COVID-19, but there's a likelihood that these numbers have really gone up in terms of the fact that there's been impact of food availability as a result of the pandemic. Then in terms of sharing some of the current concerns, this one speaks to unsustainable agricultural practices, which border on the use of chemicals, which have had great impact on the health of people and also to the entire food chain as a whole. Then also the other aspect is the unsustainable farmer input and output subsidies, which are heavily impacting on the vulnerability of women. As it is, there is need to address the major inefficiencies in the way food systems are currently being financed. Because what we are seeing with the food system is that the sustainable farming practices that contribute to positive outcomes for environmental management are not really funded. And this has a great barrier on the performance of a woman. Then also the other concern is around the seed sector, which mostly has been politicized, and there's limited focus on the farmers' rights and also seed sovereignty, because farmers actually are not able to actually define what they want around the seed sector. In Africa, and particularly in Zambia, women attach so much value to the seed sector. And what we're seeing is that the seed sector actually is being taken or being monopolized by the multinational company, hence losing the value that women attach to this. And also food crisis is a justice issue, which is at the heart of every woman. And just to speak to what is happening around the attainment of integral human development, what we are seeing is that most of the current policies and development programs that are happening at the moment are not taking into account a holistic type of development, but they're more political centered, and thereby making a woman more vulnerable. And if you look at the fact that there's a relationship between environment, society, and also an individual, but then what we are seeing is that there's that disjointedness in terms of appreciating that the three aspects are actually interrelated. And in terms of the key recommendations, which maybe I just want to speak to, is seeing on how best we can ensure that agroecological practices are actually taken on board, because we believe that if we are going to ensure that we protect Mother Earth, I think the pandemic has brought with it so many lessons in terms of seeing the fact that you cannot address one problem at a whole. And if we're looking at addressing poverty, I think there are a number of dimensions that are found in society which also needs to be embraced. And one of them is the vulnerability of a woman. And the other recommendation borders on the need for actions to be directed at the food system level to make it more nutrition sensitive. We are speaking of the high levels of malnutrition in Africa, but I'm guessing if we're going to address malnutrition, it has to start with having nutritious food, which will start from making sure that a pregnant woman actually feeds on the right food. Then in terms of my last words in my concluding remarks, I just want to maybe ask ourselves, or the question that, what kind of a food system do we want? I'm guessing from the Africa side, what we want is a food system that pushes for adoption of agroecology principles that guarantees resilience. So in this case, embracing the vulnerability that a woman has, a type of food system that looks at soil health, seed and food sovereignty, respect for the farmers' rights, and also addresses household food and nutrition security while leaving no woman behind. What we have seen in the past is that there's been a lot of technologies, research and development that has arisen as a result of poverty, and also the fact that we are under attack with climate change. But there is need to ensure that in whatever technology that is being developed, it does not leave out a woman who's more vulnerable. And just to quote some of the words that Pope Francis says in his encyclical, let us see, is that whenever food is thrown out, it is as if it were stolen from the table of the poor. And this is a strong statement in my view, which I think speaks to the importance of the entire food chain. And if you're going to really ensure that we have a sustainable food system in place, or food chain, it's important to actually ensure that the contribution that a woman makes is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Musamba, thank you so much for that. Romana, Betty Rose, Musamba, thank you for bringing the perspective of your home place and the powerful role that women play, and particularly for making that link with climate change and environment and lack of connection there by policies and funding too often. Thank you so much for that. And for challenging us, what kind of food system do we want? And that is the opportunity among the disruption of COVID-19 and the pandemic. It does show us that bold change is possible and quickly if we put our minds to it. So my thanks to each of you, Daniela, Ndaya, Romana, Betty Rose, and Musamba, for sharing your wisdom and helping us better understand the vulnerabilities of women to food insecurity and the unique value they bring. You spoke especially to the importance of gender equality and agency in transforming food systems. I am going to ask for just a quick closing comment from Daniela and Ndaya, particularly as it relates to the fact that this is about elevating the role of women in advance of the UN Food Summit in September and the pre-summit in Rome. And just to say that women and food justice have been on the agenda for decades, and yet we sense change is slow. So with that summit in mind, Ndaya and Daniela, if you would please both offer just 1 or 2 minutes of closing remarks of what you would like this audience to take away as we're thinking about disrupting the debate at the UN Food Summit later this year. Ndaya, I'll turn it to you first, and we'll close with Daniela.
Thank you so much, Kerry, for this opportunity. So as we have seen through the various contributions, the contribution of women is not unknown. So it is something that is well known by everyone. So what is important is not so much to only talk about women, but also to have women fully represented at all the different levels of decision-making throughout the food system summit. So it's important, whether it's at the community level, at the national level, regional level, or the global level, to have women properly represented, so then they can voice their concerns, but also relay the concern of their constituency. The second element that is also key is to ensure that there is data to actually monitor and track the results. So as I was ending my intervention, I did raise the importance of having disaggregated data. Whatever is not measured doesn't matter. So measuring the contribution of women, the role of the importance, and attaching budgets to that is also key in order to move forward gender equality and women's empowerment in food systems. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Ndaya. Daniela, please.
Sì, io come credo insomma siamo d'accordo tutte su questo aspetto. La questione delle donne è trasversale in ogni ambito del quale noi ci occupiamo, in ogni ambito della nostra vita, per cui penso che bisogna continuare ad agire su un aspetto prettamente culturale, far comprendere a chi magari ancora non lo ha compreso il valore delle donne, e dobbiamo parlare agli uomini delle donne, perché guai a ragionare delle questioni di genere soltanto tra di noi. È importante che gli uomini acquisiscano la consapevolezza e la certezza che il lavoro delle donne, il valore delle donne, ci dicono anche stime qui in Italia, può addirittura aumentare di gran lunga il PIL del paese, ma questo io penso che valga in maniera trasversale. E poi noi abbiamo, come si diceva prima, questa grande opportunità che ci viene da una situazione così tragica come quella del Covid, ovvero quello di utilizzare le risorse che ci vengono messe a disposizione dalla comunità europea, e almeno noi in Italia sentiamo dire al Premier Draghi che bisogna assolutamente coinvolgere donne e giovani anche attraverso interventi mirati. Ecco, noi dobbiamo stare attenti in questa fase a non abbassare la guardia e approfittare per cercare di raddrizzare quelle storture che oggi purtroppo esistono nel lavoro ma anche nella società. Grazie.
Thank you very much. It is with sincere gratitude and humble thanks to all of our guests today for being here today, for sharing your perspective, and for kicking off a really, really important conversation. Thank you so much. And I turn it over to, I'm not sure, I think we're going into a break briefly. So we'll break for a couple moments, and then I believe we'll turn it over to Chiara Martinelli, who will take us through the next session. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.